Hey everybody, Bryan the Writer here. I wanted to, as I promised, I wanted to do another video, this time getting back to the books and a little bit less about COVID-19, although I know at this point everybody's probably a little stir-crazy sitting inside of their houses. But I hope you're all well and all healthy and stay that way. So today I want to talk a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft. Now, H.P. Lovecraft, for those of you who don't know, he was born Howard Phillips Lovecraft in 1890, and he lived till 1935. He spent most of his life in New England, in the New England area of the United States. He was born to an affluent family, and at one point that affluence sort of dried up on him. He was not what we would consider a commercial success, in that during his lifetime he never really supported himself through writing, didn't really make a ton of money in writing, but he wrote nevertheless, and I want to talk a little bit more about why that is. What I think makes Lovecraft most interesting, a most interesting character when we study horror, is that he's primarily known for Cthulhu and the Cthulhu mythos behind it. So you talk to a person on the street and you mention Cthulhu, they'll know what you're talking about, but interestingly enough, they may not know who Lovecraft was. So it's sort of like he created this invention which carried on past him, so that they knew of the invention, Cthulhu, but didn't actually know of him. You can find a lot of his collected works assembled into books. I actually picked this one at Books A Million. They have usually out front like a bargain bin, and I always sort of glance through it while I'm going through, and I found this one, and I've been clawing my way through it. So actually quite a bit of reading. He was very prolific. This collection here was put out by Penguin Classics, and it was put together by S.T. Joshi, sorry. Lovecraft is interesting because Stephen King, he has a quote on here. He says, "I think that it is beyond doubt that H.P. Lovecraft has yet to be surpassed in the 20th century's greatest practitioner of the classic horror tale." Think about that for a second. That is what Stephen King said of H.P. Lovecraft. So what does that mean? That means that the man who's considered the most influential horror novelist of our time doesn't even put himself past H.P. Lovecraft, which is pretty interesting. Now, of course, the name of this volume, The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories, draws its name heavily on his most famous piece, as it should. Some really great artwork, as you can see. But I want to talk about what made him tick. Of course, any good discussion of H.P. Lovecraft sort of has to give a nod to the fact that he was a racist. There was a lot of things he said, a lot of things that he wrote that were not necessarily good. They did reflect a lot of the commonly held ideas at the time, which is unfortunate. But you still cannot dismiss the writing that he did, even with that aspect of it. So with that understanding going forward, I want to share something with you that I found in here that I thought was interesting. It's a comment from Notes on Writing Weird Fiction, sometime around 1933. He's quoted as saying, Lovecraft is quoted as saying, "I choose weird stories because they suit my inclination best. One of my strongest and most persistent wishes being to achieve, momentarily, the illusion of some strange suspension or violation of the galling limitations of time, space, and natural law which forever imprison us and frustrate our curiosity about the infinite cosmic spaces beyond the radius of our sight and analysis." I think that probably sums up, that's probably the best reason I can think of behind why Lovecraft wrote the way he wrote. It's actually the reason that a lot of the horror writers write the way we do. I've said it before that horror provides an umbrella to work under that's pretty wide. You know, horror can be loving, it can be drenched in blood, it can be spiteful, it can be psychological, it can be all kinds of different things. And that's why it's a great medium to work in. Now, of course, we all know of Cthulhu, but I want to point out two of my favorites. One is the Statement of Randolph Carter. There's just something in the way that the story that he puts together sticks with me. The way he describes the big cypress swamp and the things that go on in there just really catches your eye. The other one I wanted to draw attention to, and actually I'll read a small passage out of it, is The Hound. I love The Hound. I'm going to read a little bit of it. By what malign fatality were we lured into that terrible Holland churchyard? I think it was the dark rumor and legendary, the tales of one buried for 5 centuries who had himself been a ghoul in his time and had stolen a potent thing from a mighty sepulchre. I can recall the scene in these final moments, the pale autumn moon over the graves, casting along horrible shadows, the grotesque trees drooping sullenly to meet the neglected grass and the crumbling slabs, the vast legions of strangely colossal bats that flew against the moon, the antique ivied church pointing a huge spectral finger at the livid sky, the phosphorescent insects that danced like death fires under the yews in a distant corner. There is nothing you can do short of maybe, I'm not even sure painting a picture would necessarily get that description down as aptly as Lovecraft put it down on paper. And Stephen King in his book on writing talks about writing being a form of telekinesis. Lovecraft's been dead since 1930-something, and yet here he is, putting these images in my head way after he's gone and reduced to nothing but bone. Sort of a fascinating thought, but I think that most accurately sums up what's happening here. So, if you haven't really dove into Lovecraft, take a pinch of salt and say, yes, I know he sometimes wrote ideas that we would not certainly subscribe to today, but definitely dive in, tear apart some of his stories, read them for what they were, the vivid imagination of a fairly dark mind. I love it. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and for God's sakes, wash your hands. Have a great day. Bye.